In 1960, at the age of 26, Jane Goodall went to the Gombe National Park in Tanzania to be the first Western scientist to study chimpanzees in the wild. Today, she's the world's foremost expert on chimpanzees, and she's said to be the first and only person ever to be accepted into chimpanzee society. She was said to be there for 6 months, and for the first 3 months, she really didn't see much of them at all. Just seen through binoculars from afar or a chimp butt running away. They were afraid of her. She said they'd never seen anything like this white ape before. But eventually, one of them that she had named David Greybeard warmed up to her a little bit. At the time, it was unheard of for researchers to name the animals they were observing. Instead, they would number the animals and hold themselves to a strict level of detachment with their subjects. Even worse, she ascribed them personalities. She said, "I was ascribing human characteristics to non-human animals and was thus guilty of that worst ethological sins, anthropomorphism." But she wasn't college educated and didn't see it that way. After all, even as a child, she had witnessed that her own dog Rusty had a personality. And she had observed behaviors like hugging, kissing, pats on the back, and even tickling, all of which people had considered solely human behaviors. And 5 months after getting to the Gombe, Goodall witnessed David Greybeard using grass stalks to fish termites out of a mound. No one in Western science had seen a non-human make a tool before, and it was considered a defining characteristic of what it is to be human. Later, she saw him and another chimp named Goliath stripping leaves off twigs to make termite fishing tools. She said that was a turning point for her, because that's what got the National Geographic Society to continue funding her work past the 6 months. They sent out a photographer and put her on the cover of National Geographic, and they made a documentary narrated by Orson Welles. And the academic world was forced to respect her when they saw what she saw. Somebody mentioned a part 2 in the comments, and I'll bring it to you tomorrow. When Jane Goodall was 4.5 years old, she waited for hours alone in a hen house to see how a hen lays an egg. Her mother didn't know where she was and was worried sick and had called the police. But when she finally came inside, instead of getting angry, her mother sat down and listened to a story about how a hen lays an egg. Jane told the On Being podcast, "Isn't that the making of a little scientist?" And you know, a different mother might have crushed that early scientific curiosity, and I might not have done what I've done. Well, by the time she had ever went to college, she had already made 2 important chimpanzee behavioral discoveries. First was that they're omnivorous and eat meat. They were thought to be strict vegetarians, but Jane saw them hunting and eating colobus monkeys and bush pigs and other small animals. She saw them isolate one in a tree, and they blocked all possible exits, and then one went up and ripped it apart and gave those parts to the begging members of the troop. One study found that the chimps in the Gombe eat as many as 1/3 of the colobus monkeys in the park in a year. And the second, as seen in part 1, was that she's seen him stripping leaves off a twig to fish termites out of a mound. So after that, she went to Cambridge to get her PhD and was only the 8th person who was allowed to study for a PhD without ever getting her bachelor's. After getting her PhD, she went back to the Gombe to study chimpanzees and witnessed a war between troops called the 4 Years' War. The community she had been watching since 1960, called the Kasakela community, was splintering. 6 adult males and 3 adult females went off to form their own community and were called the Kahala community. Over the next 4 years, the Kasakela males diligently hunted and took out all the Kahama males, and it was some brutal shit that would probably get me guidelined if I showed a picture. It was the first time scientists had observed sustained warfare among non-human primates. She was kind of taken aback. Before that, she thought that chimpanzees were like us but rather nicer, and now she had seen them deliberately attack each other and leave rivals for dead. In the late 70s and 80s, she dove headfirst into activism. In 1977, the Jane Goodall Institute was founded to promote the treatment and understanding of primates. It now has offices in over 25 countries around the world. Its global youth program, Roots and Shoots, has over 10,000 groups in 100 countries. When Jane entered the field of primatology, it was almost exclusively a man's game. But today, likely in no small part due to Jane's influence and activism, about half of primatologists are women. So TLDR, if you got kids, support their curiosity because it can go a long way.